think about this. For anyone listening, think about how would you normally approach a meeting? You got a team meeting, a sales pitch you're doing, speaking to a member of staff. What would you normally do? You start to approach that meeting and you think, what do I want to say? And as soon as you think, what do I want to say? You've gone in the wrong direction, because nobody's interested in what you want to say. As hard as that is for us all to hear this, nobody cares about what you want to say. They care about what do they need to hear and what order do they need to hear that information in, such that they are captivated from the start all the way to the end and compelled to take action on what you said, based on you saying something that they need to hear in the order that they need to hear it.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the None of Your Business podcast. Sean and Lacey here, just as we are each and every week. Super excited to share with you some information that we actually feel will be transformative this week for all of our listeners and viewers. Make sure that you are locked in, that you're in a zone, that you're concentrating today, because this information is going to be very valuable. You know, when we talk about leadership and communication, so right there, right? That's something that I know so many people struggle with. In fact, what's difficult, and I'm excited about the conversation, is what's difficult is oftentimes we think it's them.
Right.
Like, they don't get it, Sean.
They don't understand.
So hard working with today's youth, you know, the Gen Zs. They don't get it. Oh, my clients. Oh, you don't understand, people. You don't understand, Sean. The people here in Indiana, they're not the same.
As
but
the
then
people in
But then
New
you go.
York.
But then you go to New York, and they're like, "Well, you don't get it, Sean. You know, the people in New York, they're different. Like everywhere, everybody thinks that they don't get it." Can you imagine going to at a young age, going out and working, and what's funny is I relate to this, right? Going out and building a business, and this isn't building, but imagine trying to build your business in a world where you didn't even speak their language. Well, that's what I did, because at the age of 24, I went to went to Costa Rica. I thought that like one semester of Spanish would
get you by.
Would get me by. Yeah. I also was an arrogant American who thought, like, doesn't everybody speak English in the United States? And then you get to a place and you're like, wow, communication is very important. Yeah. Communication is critical. And then you also realize communication is actually more than just words, not just the way that I say things. The way that I say things is important. We've had people, you know, that specialize in that. You know, even down to tonality, pronunciation, enunciation, all of that is important. But what if you don't even speak the same language? How do we overcome that? And then you realize, wow, maybe there's these subtleties that are even more important, not in just communicating a message, but also in leadership. And instilling confidence and inspiring people and being a good leader. And we're going to go into all of that and so much more with today's guest. Let's bring him in, Richard Newman, all the way. We've been getting a lot of Europeans. We should Europeanize the None of Your Business podcast, all the way from the UK. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. And yes, it's great to hear about your experience in Costa Rica, something I can really relate to from, you know, where I got started, of working overseas and dealing with people who don't even speak the same language as me, and aiming to figure out a way to bridge that gap.
Well, we always start the podcast with the same question, so we're going to kick it off with that question with you. It's going to be absolutely interesting. For context, Richard, a lot of times, you know, you are someone that, you know, you do a lot of trainings for people. You speak on large stages. You have had exposure as an actor, so a lot of people see you. And when people see someone like that, oftentimes we miss the journey. We're just seeing the end of the journey. We're like, wow, look at Richard on stage. That must be so great, because, you know, he must know all the right people. He got all the right breaks. I mean, he's just a lucky guy. His dad probably called a friend, and that's why Richard is where he is today. I wish that would happen for me. That's what everybody thinks. Like, well, he's him, I'm me. And then what we find out on this show is that, listen, these guys that come on the show, they've had incredibly difficult journeys. There's been bumps and bruises along the way. And I can't even imagine, part of your story, the beginning part of your story at 17. Um, what a way to kick this journey off. So I'd love for you to tell us, how do you get to be Richard Newman?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm really glad you've raised this because I think it's a key theme that I'm always keen to highlight for people is to say that, if you look at movies, look at Hollywood, look at Disney and so on, there is often that sense of, one day someone's going to come along and give me that big break. That must be how other people get successful. Because if you look at something like, I often teach storytelling to people in business. If you look at something like Harry Potter, classic sort of story, is that he's just living under the stairs and nobody likes him and he's treated awfully. And then one day there's a knock on the door and he finds out he has superpowers and he is the greatest gift to the wizarding world in the history of the universe. And off he goes to get this big break where people are going to give him everything he needs to become the greatest version of himself. And that story has been told millions of times to the point where we start to think that must be what it is, where we think, if I'm a good person and I go about my day, one day there's a knock on the door and somebody comes along and gives me an opportunity. That must be how people get successful. And I'm always keen to say to people, you don't need someone else to pick you. You can pick yourself. You can do the hard work and you can make the journey. Because like you said, I'm fortunate now where I speak on stage, I get to work with large audiences. And sometimes people come up to me and they say, oh, you're just a natural at this, Richard. I could never do that. And I'm always keen to say to them, I'm really not. I'm glad that you said that. I'm honored that you think that I'm a natural at communication. I'm really not. So my journey goes all the way back to being when I was 4 years old, was the first time when I realized there was something different about me. I moved schools. My parents had moved to a new area and I was trying to get to know the other kids in my class at that school. And there was something mismatching about the communication. I felt like I was living in this kind of glass bubble, trying to connect with the other kids. And I didn't know what was wrong with what I was doing or why it wasn't working. I was trying to get the on ramp into a conversation and it just wouldn't work. And I started to think, okay, there's something different about me. I'm going to need to figure this out. And I gradually realized I was very shy as a child. By the time I got into my 20s, I realized that I'm very highly introverted. There's a big scale of introvert to extrovert. I'm right on the introvert end of that. But it wasn't until I was 44 years old that I was diagnosed as being autistic. And what that means for me, autism, it's a very broad diagnosis, encompasses a lot of things these days. For me, it means that the way I see communication and my instincts around communication is different to the vast population. So there are certain social cues that people would do where, if you imagine like a fish in a fishbowl that just happens to breathe underwater and knows how to swim. And that's what it was like for me looking on the outside of the goldfish bowl, thinking, how is that happening? How do they do that stuff? And so what I realized was that I would need to work on communication. I realized in my teenage years I was a step behind other people. And so I started reading, and I read over 200 books on the subject of communication across about sort of 6 or 7 years, looking at body language, tone of voice, storytelling, stage presence, anything that I thought would give me some kind of key to unlock communication for me. I then, as I started to find my voice, I realized I wanted to help other people find their voice. And so I took an unusual decision where we come back to what you said about going to Costa Rica. I chose to go when I was 18 years old, to go off to the foothills of the Himalayas, where I was living up in this little Tibetan monastery with a group of Tibetan monks who didn't speak a single word of English. And I was there to help them learn how to speak English so they could get sponsorship and continue their way of life. And so there I was living with them thinking, okay, we don't have any common language. We can't use words to communicate. And I had to figure out another way. And I pretty soon realized through body language and through my tone of voice, I could connect with them and they could start to understand me. And then I would give them lessons every day, usually during a blackout. Just to put context around this, they barely had electricity. There was no internet back then, no mobile phones. They had a phone landline that barely worked for about 3 or 4 minutes per week. And so we were completely cut off from the outside world. It took 6 weeks for a letter to come from England to the monastery and 6 weeks for me to send a reply. So for someone to hear from me, it took 3 months. So there I was with these monks. And I was just using body language and tone of voice to connect with them. By the end of 6 months, they could speak English. I learned how to speak Nepali, which was the main language of the area, the easiest language for me to learn. And I came back transformed by this experience. I then studied acting for 3 years in London, learning how to sit, stand, breathe, move, and speak in a way that would bring an audience into a story and connect with an actor on stage. And then as a hobby, I started to share what I was learning about communication. And people seem to really enjoy it. And by word of mouth, this then led to me now having this team of 20 people that work with me. We get about 2,000 bookings a year to go and work with people. And we've trained well over 100,000 people around the world. But it was a big journey to go on that. And I'm pleased to say, for anybody who's struggling with communication in any way, if I can go on that journey, you can go on it, and you can go on it quicker, because I figured out the little keys along the way that unlock communication for people that I can then share with clients.
Man, first off, what an amazing story. What a great journey that, led you to this place where you can share your message and help others. But I want to take it all the way back, because we're talking about communication. And I think it's important to really define terms here, because many people on the planet have different ideas of what effective communication actually is. I may think that I'm effectively communicating with my significant other, my spouse, but he may not see it as effective communication, or to my team, or to people in my world, or to people that are listening to me on this podcast. So for you, how do you define effective communication so that you can teach those ideas to others?
Is a great question. And so I'll come back to something that you said towards the start of the podcast. You said that the most common thing I find around communication is that people blame the other person. If it's not working well, it must be them, right?
Bad
so
listeners.
You often get
You're
this,
bad listeners
bad
all over the
listeners.
planet. Yeah.
right. So sometimes you get this with successful salespeople where they say, "Look, I went and met with these other clients and it went really well. So clearly the slides must be good. I must be good. There's something working. I spoke to somebody else and it didn't go well. So there's something wrong with them." And also this translates into, sometimes clients will come to me and they hear the term BodyTalk, which is the name of my company, and they'll say, "Oh, I want to know how to read other people because I want to figure out what's going on in their mind so I can figure out how to fix the situation." And they're taking the focus off of themselves. And I say to them, "I'm going to start with you, because if I start with you, then I can work on what are the things that you're doing that you could take ownership for, you can take responsibility for, that's going to improve the communication." Now, one of the ways in which we can do that is, let's think about what people say in communication. And think about this, for anyone listening, think about how would you normally approach a meeting? You've got a team meeting, a sales pitch you're doing, speaking to a member of staff. What would you normally do? You start to approach that meeting and you think, what do I want to say? And as soon as you think, what do I want to say, you've gone in the wrong direction, because nobody's interested in what you want to say. As hard as that is for us all to hear this, nobody cares about what you want to say. They care about what do they need to hear and what order do they need to hear that information in, such that they are captivated from the start all the way to the end and compelled to take action on what you said, based on you saying something that they need to hear in the order that they need to hear it. So if you want to have really effective communication, let's look at the structure of that communication. The human brain, to go really simple on the science behind this, there's three major areas of the mind that you want to engage to have effective communication, which is the survival mind, the emotional mind, and the logical mind. Those are the areas you want to light up in the other person to really feel like you're effectively engaging with them. Now, turn that around and think back over the last couple of weeks to the meetings that you may have been having. And most people would say that 99% of the meetings they have spend 99% of the time talking about logic. They're talking about data and details and graphs and bullet points and spreadsheets and so on. And people leave those meetings needing 2 cups of coffee before they go to their next meeting, because they've got this major cognitive fatigue where they're listening to all this data that is based on what the other person wanted to say to them. So instead, what you need to do is to think, okay, if I'm going to really engage somebody in communication, I need to think, what do they need to hear? What's important for this person that would really light up their survival mind, their emotional mind, and their logical mind, and light them up in that order? Because then by the time you give them data that you want to share with them, they're really engaged and they really want to hear this information because they understand why it's important for them. So another piece that you can look at to make this effective communication, if you want to share ideas with someone, is to think about, well, what role are you playing in the communication? And this is another place where a lot of people go wrong, because a lot of people think, okay, I have challenges in my life and I have goals that I want to achieve. And I'm going to go into a meeting and go into a conversation and talk about those things because that's what I care about. They care about their own challenges and their own goals. And as soon as you do that, the other person stops listening because they think, okay, I've got challenges too. I've got goals as well. So why would I keep on listening to yours? So I call that going into the meeting and trying to be the hero, where you say, look, I'm the hero at the center of my life story. I've got challenges. I've got goals. You need to help me. I want to hit my sales target. I want to avoid my boss yelling at me. So I'm going to say what needs to be said based on that. And I encourage people to go in the other direction and remember that everyone is listening to you based on their life story. They have challenges and they have goals. And when you realize that, you can have really effective communication, because instead of being the hero in the conversation, talking about your challenges, your goals, be a mentor in the conversation. What does a mentor do? We know this from storytelling. A mentor shows up, like if it's Yoda or Dumbledore or Gandalf, what do? They show up and they speak to the hero and they go, what are your challenges? What are your goals? What can I do? What can I say to you that might help you get you from your concerns across to where you'd like to be? And people are riveted with that because you're speaking to them about something that matters to them. And so by remembering that, you can have really effective conversations where people are dying to see you again. They want to invite you over for dinner. They want you to be at their next brainstorming because they know you're going to deeply listen about what matters to them and share with them information in the order that they need to hear it. So those are things that can really kickstart highly effective communication.
So those are great tips on what to do. Can you give us some examples with your work where, people that are unknowingly making some big mistakes and that are causing big problems for them because we don't know the pitfalls? Like, what are some examples of, like, hey, just don't do this because then you're going to ruin this?
Yeah. So to give you an example around this, to go at the highest level of sort of, what can happen in a business. There was a company I was working with, a team of training about 5 years ago. And this is a large construction company, an American-based company. And they'd been working towards winning a contract for about 18 months. And they'd done pretty well. They'd beaten out most of the competitors, but now they got to the point where they were third place out of 3 potential who might get this contract. And the contract was worth 800 million US dollars. So a big contract. They'd worked on it for many months, and they knew this was a make or break contract for them. And I was working with them along with a couple of people from my team, working with them for a few days leading up to this final pitch. But the night before the final pitch, the CEO of their company flew into London to this boardroom where we're looking over the River Thames, and they're bidding for this contract to win the opportunity to build a brand new building on the bank of the River Thames that would become part of the iconic skyline. And the CEO got up to practice his part of the pitch, and this was about 5:30 p.m. and the real pitch was going to happen 9 o'clock the next morning. And so he started doing the pitch, and I looked at him and I was looking at the team, and I knew he was going in the wrong direction. I just stopped him after about 3 or 4 minutes. And I said, I'm sorry to stop you. Do you really believe that you're going to win tomorrow? And he said, no. And the whole room just stopped breathing. They sort of looked at me like, you're not supposed to talk to our boss like this. And they looked at him like, what do you mean we're not going to win? We've invested so much money and time in this. We're not going to win. What are we even rehearsing this for? I said to him, thank you for being honest about this. Can you tell me why you don't think that you're going to win? And he said, yeah, I'll tell you why. Because the decision-making panel have decided that they don't like Jim in our business. And he's pivotal to us getting this project to work, so we can't remove him from this. So I've had to swoop in here at the last minute to try and fix the situation, to make sure that we get the contract that we deserve, but we're not going to get it anyway, no matter what I do. And I said to him, okay, let me see if I can just take a pause on what's happening in the dynamic of the communication. I said to him, would it be fair to say that you feel like you've been asked to step in as the hero of this piece, this pitch, to save the day? And he said, okay, well, you could say that. I'm not saying that I'm a hero, but you could say that. I said, okay. And would you say that if we look at a story, that it feels a bit like your team is like the victim of the story that you're having to save? And he said, yeah, I'm absolutely saying that. I said, okay, if you're the hero, your team is the victim, you tell me, who is the client in this story? Who is the client? Hero, victim, what are they? And he said, oh, I see where you're going with this. They're the villain. I said, exactly right. Now you tell me, if you treat someone like the villain of a story when you're talking to them, how likely are they to give you $800 million? And he said, they're not. I said, great. We need to change this around so that you can go in tomorrow not being the hero, not being the victim, but coming in as the mentor, because guess what that makes them? He said, I don't know. I said, this is going to make them the hero. And that's what they want. That's when they're going to really listen to you, because you are seeing the world through their eyes, not through your own. And again, to come back to your earlier question, that's how you get really effective communication, is when you're able to see the world through somebody else's eyes, not just your own. That's where empathy can come from. That's where deeper listening can come from as well, is always aiming to figure out, what does the world look like through this person's eyes, listening to the world through their ears, because when you start to do that, then you can have a really effective connection.
But first, before you go, I want to introduce Richard to our community even deeper, because like if you're watching this on video, who was sucked into that story?
I
Like,
know, absolutely.
He's a storyteller. That was awesome. Thank you.
It is such an unbelievable example for a couple of reasons. Not just putting people into the place of the hero, but also, for us, we work with a lot of our clients specifically on their mindset around things. And you said that you asked him, do you believe that you will win? And his mindset, his overriding mindset was no. And I think a lot of people, when they think about mindset, they recognize that their mindset can inhibit them from, getting a deal or converting new clients, or even their mindset can inhibit them from having great relationships. But I've never actually thought about how it can stop us from having effective communication. And so for everybody listening out there, man, that should really hit you, that the way that you think can also alter the way that you communicate. And I know that you recently wrote a book, Lift Your Impact. And this book talks about, transforming your mindset around things, becoming a better leader, having more influence. So tell us a little bit about that book and how it can help others.
Sure. So, I wrote this book because I realized across the years, having taught communication now for more than 2 decades for people, I realized that mindset was always important. But more recently, over the last few years, where we've gone through the pandemic and there's all sorts of issues going on with politics and the economy and all these things we're dealing with, is that there's 3 major pieces our clients have been coming to me for, with big requests they didn't have earlier. The first big request is that people have been saying the last few years they've been feeling more stressed, more under pressure, more overwhelmed from situations. So if they were struggling with their mindset beforehand, they're struggling even more so now. Secondly, people have been saying that they feel that their communication with people, their relationships with the people that they work with and deal with day to day, is much more superficial than it used to be, more surface level, transactional, where they get the job done, but they don't feel like they really know each other the way that they used to when they were around each other every day, around sort of the coffee breaks and going for a quick beer after work maybe. People used to spend more time with each other and get to know the other human beings around them. And since we've done this social distancing for so long, there is more of a transactional, less of an amiable way of dealing with each other. And so people have been feeling lonely. And thirdly, people have been saying to me that they might be showing up to the same job that they were always showing up to, but they're just questioning why. Like, what is the point of all of this? What is the purpose? And so there's been the great resignation in the US, or quiet quitting that's talked about, of people showing up and doing the bare minimum because they don't know what it's for. And so in this book, I wanted to give people 3 things. Firstly, to have an extraordinary mindset so you can be a rock in the storm. No matter what's happening around you, you're able to be the very best version of yourself. Secondly, when you've got a great mindset, then you need to interact with other people, which is where one of the big challenges often lies. How do you make sure that you have deep connections and great understanding of the people around you so that you can really transform your influence and have a win-win connection with the people that you deal with day to day? And then thirdly, how do you lastingly change your future? How can you transform the future for you and for other people and leave an amazing legacy? And so I wanted to deal with all those pieces in that book. So to come back to what you were saying there about mindset around communication, it is so true that mindset gets in the way. And the most important piece that I'd like to share with people on that is that what we're often looking for in communication is external validation. And that is one of the biggest killers to having a confident mindset. So for people to relate to that, this is the one that people often immediately relate to is, think about if you ever put something on social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, you ever put anything on social media and then 30 minutes later, just checked in to see how many likes you've got, and you feel really bummed out because you've only got 7 likes. You're like, oh, what am I not doing here? Like, how do I get that validation I want from other people? And that's what happens when people go for a job interview. They're trying to get validation from the other person. They go and do a pitch. They're trying to get validation from that client that what they're doing or saying is good enough. And when you do that, it turns you into a less confident communicator. And also, you're not coming from a grounded and confident place. You are just trying to say what you think will please somebody else. And so again, it feels surface level and lacks the authenticity that we need. Whenever I talk to people about what do you want from someone, what would be a great relationship, a great conversation, they say, I want the person to be real. I want them to be authentic. I want them to be present and in the moment. So one of the best tips you can have to do that for all those situations is to give yourself validation before you communicate. And to do that, one of the simplest ways to do this is a great study going back to 2015, I believe this was, by Cresswell and Sherman, where they did a series of experiments around the triasocial stress test. And they proved that if you concentrate on your values before you're speaking to somebody else in an important meeting, think about your values, your principles that you want to live your life by, which might be honesty or compassion or putting your family first, whatever they are for you. If you spend 15 minutes focusing on what a great person you are based on these values, how these values have served you in important and critical moments and decisions you've made in your life, once you focus on them for up to 15 minutes, you've validated yourself. You then go into a meeting. If the person decides they're not going to give you the job, or if they're giving you a hard time and tough questions and really grilling you, you'll think, I don't need this person's validation. I have validation. So you're not being needy. You're not trying to stretch yourself in order to get that job or get their approval. You're just staying in your confident center in that communication and being authentic. And you are much more likely to get that person to say yes. I mean, there's certain sales pitches I've personally been into where I went into it thinking, I don't know if we can do this job. I don't know if we're the right people for it. And I don't know if I honestly have time to do this job if it comes off. And I've just gone in saying, okay, this is who we are and this is what we do. And they've said, we really want to work with you. And I've had to say, okay, let me just check if I'm the right person to work with you. They're like, but I'm offering you the job. I just want to double check if I'm the right person for you. And then they said, these are the dates. And I've had to say, okay, I can't do those dates. Well, we'll change the dates. We'll do it another day. And so by staying in my center, staying grounded in myself, it's actually allowed to have, a much better impact on other people. So that's what I encourage people to do.
I just want to real quick then get your take on the other side of that coin. There exists the people that, I mean, and I'm not saying this in a negative way. It's probably out of necessity. And you've mentioned sales. So people that have a business that's starting, I just need clients. So I'm not even centered in, I am centered in me. Like that's all I care about, right? Like, because I just need you to give me money because I am trying to get my business off the ground. How do we strike that balance? Because I would imagine that if I was solely centered in me, that this is not going to come off well. I'm not going to be able to communicate effectively because I'm just trying to get you to do what I need you to do so that I can continue my business. That's on the other side of looking for like, I don't even care about the validation. I just want you to say yes, give me money. How do we reconcile that?
So in terms of the validation piece, firstly, is that part of the idea of doing it is that it places that sense of greater value on your worth. Because the worst thing that you can do going in to try and get a job or trying to do a sales pitch is to seem needy in any way, because then the person thinks, oh, you don't seem to value yourself or your products or your service. You're just asking for like pennies for something that should be worth more than that. They get suspicious, they walk away. A great example of this is Jamie Kern Lima, who is the founder of It Cosmetics. And early days, she was really struggling to grow this business. And so she went to a potential investor and really thought this person was going to invest. And she was at the point where she'd knocked on every door. She tried every single thing that she could in order to get investment. And she'd realized that going into this meeting with this potential investor, that if he offered her pennies for the company, she was willing to give away the vast majority of it just for the sake of having an investor that might help her get to the next stage. And the investor said to her, do you know what? I'm not going to give you the money because I don't think that somebody like you is going to be able to sell makeup to the women that you're trying to sell this to. So I'm backing away. And she apparently after that, she went to her car and cried. And then she thought to herself, do you know what? I'm glad that he said that, because I believe that he's wrong, because I know my own worth. And then she decided, okay, I'm going to approach the business differently. Long story short, 6 years from when she had that conversation where she got rejected, where she was being needy, trying to get it and got denied. 6 years later, she sold her company for over $1 billion. She became the first CEO of a brand within L'Oreal for her It Cosmetics. And on the day that that happened, the person who denied her, rejected her 6 years later, got in touch with her and said, I just want you to know I'm happy for you and I was wrong. And she was thinking, I'm so glad that in that moment when I was needy and you rejected me, because otherwise I never would have made it to this level of success. It was only by getting grounded in her value, knowing what she was worth, that suddenly she could show up and people would say, okay, I believe in you at this stage, because you appear to believe in yourself in that moment.
I mean, that's such a powerful exercise. And I think a lot of us, too, it's really easy for us to lose sight of our value in moments that are extremely tough. And that's one of the hardest things about being a leader, right? Is not only recognize your value, but making sure that you can maintain that and translate that value of yourself and your company into the others that you're leading. And so I know you have the book, Lift Your Impact. And I think that anybody that is out there that's an individual needs to get this book. But tell us a little bit about your company, BodyTalk, because I know that what you're talking about probably takes these concepts and helps leaders of larger companies translate that into their teams.
Yeah, exactly. So I realized, early on, given I've been building my business now 23 years, it got to a place, maybe it was like 16 years ago, where I thought I can't be everywhere at once. I need to build a company in order to fulfill my mission. And my mission really is to help as many people as possible to find their voice, get the reactions and respect that they deserve, so that they in turn can help tilt the world in a more positive direction. That's the mission that I'm on. So for me, it's not a business. It's not sort of a money-making scheme. I'm on a mission because I had to find my voice. So I want as many other people to find their voice as possible. And so I couldn't be in more than one place. And so I was having to turn down work. And so I started to build up this team around me. We've got this brilliant team of experts where initially what happened, I was very much focusing my expertise around body language. Someone came to me and said, we really need some voice coaching as well as the body language stuff. And so I found someone who had vocal expertise. Then someone else said, well, it's great that we're doing the delivery stuff, but we really need storytelling. So I found who's the best expert I can know on storytelling, and let's build it up and let's all learn from each other, and so on and so on. And so now we've got BBC presenters on the team, people who've been journalists for years, psychotherapists, people who've got these extraordinary skills. Anything that we need in order to take someone from a place where they're struggling with communication to get to a place of total confidence where they can get all the results that they deserve. And what I've loved seeing along the way is that, we do one-to-one coaching, small group workshops, large speeches where I'll be on stage in front of thousands of people. And I love every piece of that. But what I love seeing is the transformation this can give people, which has been a huge surprise. So on the surface, what we do is we teach communication skills. But when you help someone find their voice, it can be totally transformative, to the point where there was a lady who we worked with, this is maybe 10 years ago. She came on a 2-day workshop with our team, and the workshop was probably called presentation skills, something like that, because it's a type of communication that's needed by leaders in a business. And I went to train this lady and her team on a booster event maybe 6 months later. I showed up, I was just setting up and getting ready to do the event. And some of her colleagues came in the room earlier than she did. And they said to me, Richard, do you know what's happened for Sarah? Do you know what's happened these last few months? I said, no, what do you mean? I was like suddenly getting worried, like, is she okay? And they said, you have transformed her life. Like, I mean, sure, she came on a presentation skills course, but now like her relationship with her children is different. Her marriage has come back to life. Her clients are giving us amazing feedback and giving her bigger contracts. And when she walks in the office in the morning, she is beaming. She has come back to life. And I was thinking, wait, hang on a second. Didn't we did something like working on her slides. We did something around body language. How did that happen that she had that resonating effect throughout all these different aspects of her life? And there was that moment where I thought, when you give someone their voice, suddenly it frees them up to be more of themselves for all the people around them. And of course, it transforms the way that you interact with everybody, because you've got these tools, this ability to take all of your potential, your knowledge, your experience that was previously trapped. And when you find your voice, suddenly you can flourish in all kinds of directions and be what you need to be for the different people around you. So for me, that was just a wonderful moment to see the long-term impact and that ripple effect of helping someone find their voice. It's never going to be something that just impacts you in 1 or 2 meetings. It can then translate into the rest of your life as well.
And you are a part of our ripple effect, and we appreciate that here on None of Your Business. I hope that people are hearing Richard in this short amount of time and understanding you need to get the book. I already told Lacey, like, hey, put that on my list. I want to make sure we get both books. There's 2 books, by the way.
The other book.
Yes, there's 2 books. You were born to speak and lift your impact. And then also that you reach out to Richard, ukbodytalk.com. You just need to I can't think of anybody that, we have some very influential friends. I can't think of anybody who's like, oh, they don't need this.
Yeah.
Like everybody can get better, right? Like if you're communicating and you have 100 million followers on social media, what happens if you get better?
Right.
Everyone can get better. I want to encourage you to reach out. UK Body Talk, get your copy of Lift Your Impact. Read the book and reach out to Richard Newman. Yes. Richard, I look forward to doing more things with you, staying in touch and bringing you at greater levels to our community, because you definitely have an amazing gift, an amazing message. But most importantly, you're sharing that message, which is also your message, right? You're doing it. You're living the thing that you're teaching. And I think that our audience, that's what everybody wants. They have a service that they honestly believe can change the world. Just if more people knew about it. Well, I got to tell you, the first thing is craft your message. So the art of storytelling. 2, you've got to get really good at communicating.
Stand strong in your value and then communicate your message.
So we'll be seeing more of Richard, I'm sure. Richard, thanks for joining us on the None of Your Business podcast. You absolutely crushed it.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Lacey. I really appreciate it.
All right, everybody, this one's going to go down in history as one of the greatest episodes. Make sure you throw us a review up. Let us know what you thought about Richard. Share this episode with your friends, because I'm telling you, 1,000,000%, Richard was dropping bombs that will benefit them, make people's lives better. Be a part of that ripple effect. Share today's episode. Put it on social media. Send it to somebody. Let Richard fulfill his life's purpose and let him speak into them and change their lives. I don't know how we top this one, but Lacey and I, is part of the deal. We've got to try next week, so we'll give it a go. We'll be back again next week with a brand new edition of the None of Your Business podcast.